It was a mild evening in late September, and the city's lights twinkled in a semblance of stars as my wife, Anna, and I stepped out of the quaint Italian restaurant where we had celebrated my birthday. The night was alive with the soft hum of distant traffic and the occasional clink of wine glasses from nearby diners still enjoying their meals. We walked hand in hand, lost in laughter and the kind of easy conversation that had defined our marriage for the last 7 years. "I still can't believe you remembered that story about my first dog," I said, squeezing her hand. "I must have told you that once, when we first met." Anna's laughter was musical, her eyes sparkling with mirth. "It's your birthday, Michael." "I wanted it to be perfect," she replied, her voice warm. As we meandered through the dimly lit streets toward our home, the ambience was perfect, the music from the restaurant still echoing in our ears, mingling with the scent of autumn that crept through the city's usual aromas. But then, the atmosphere shifted palpably. I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the kind of instinctual alertness that grips you when something, or someone, is amiss. Glancing back discreetly, I noticed a shadow detaching itself from the deeper darkness of an alleyway. A young man, thin and slightly disheveled, began to follow us at a cautious distance. "Anna, do you know that guy?" I murmured under my breath, trying to keep the worry from my voice. Turning slightly, Anna cast a quick glance over her shoulder. "What guy?" she whispered back, a flicker of confusion crossing her features. Before I could respond, the distance between us and the follower closed rapidly. My heart pounded against my ribs as the young man abruptly stepped up behind me, pressing something cold and unmistakably sharp against my lower back. "If he's gone, will you come back to me?" The voice was strained, the eyes that met mine in the dim streetlight wild and desperate. Frozen, I stared at the young man, processing the weight of his words. The realization dawned on me like a slow, painful crawl. The boy was her student, the one she had mentioned in passing, the one she tutored in history. And now, he was here, with a knife and a plea that cut deeper than its blade. Anna's face drained of color, her lips parting in shock. "Tommy, what are you doing?" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. The boy, Tommy, shook visibly, his gaze flickering between me and Anna. "Tell him, Anna. Tell him how you promised you'd leave him." Every word struck like a hammer to my chest. Betrayal, so stark and cruel, unfolded in the cool night air. But amid the shock, a cold, calculating anger began to simmer within me. My initial panic receded, replaced by a chilling resolve. With deliberate calmness, I spoke, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Anna, is this true?" Her silence was the only confirmation I needed. "Get out of here, Tommy," I said, my tone even, but firm. The boy hesitated, then, seeing the resolve in my stance, he withdrew, disappearing into the night as suddenly as he had appeared. Anna tried to speak, to explain, but I held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Save it. We're done here, Anna." The walk home was a blur of silence and simmering rage. As the door to our house closed behind us, so too did the chapter of our life together. I knew what I had to do. Betrayal of this sort could not stand without consequence. My plan was clear. I would divorce her, strip away the pretenses, and ensure our paths never crossed again. The night might have ended, but the repercussions of that encounter were just beginning. The morning sun did little to warm the chill that had settled in my heart. I sat at the kitchen table, the remnants of last night's revelation spread out like a map of betrayal in front of me, text messages, fleeting glances, now all pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. Anna had left early, her parting words a mixture of apologies and pleas for understanding that fell on deaf ears. I was alone, the silence a stark contrast to the flurry of activity that my mind was undergoing. It was time to set my plans into motion. First, I called my lawyer, a longtime friend who had handled my business affairs, but never something this personal. "Mike, are you sure about this?" Dan's voice was heavy with concern. "I've never been more certain of anything," I replied, my fingers drumming against the tabletop. "We'll file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity." "I'll start drafting the paperwork today," he said after a pause, his professional tone back in place. Next, I reached out to a private investigator. If Anna had deceived me with one, there might be others, and I needed every shred of evidence to tighten the case against her. Everything you can find, pictures, messages, I want it all, I instructed the investigator, my voice cold, detached. With the practical steps underway, the emotional toll began to sink in. Anger mingled with a profound sense of loss. The life I thought I had built with Anna was a facade, one I was now tearing down with my own hands. Later that day, I went to the university where Anna taught, my resolve like armor around me. As I walked through the hallways, the murmurs of students and faculty around me seemed distant. I found her in her office, packing up her belongings, a consequence of the scandal that Tommy's confrontation had ignited. "Michael, please, let's talk about this," Anna pleaded as she noticed me standing in the doorway. "There's nothing left to talk about," I said flatly, my gaze cold. "But I love you. This was a mistake, a terrible mistake," she continued, her voice breaking with emotion. I almost faltered, the remnants of our shared past tugging at me. But then I remembered the cold steel against my back, the look in Tommy's eyes, and I hardened my resolve. "You chose this path, Anna. Now you must walk it alone," I stated, turning on my heel before she could respond. As I left the university, my phone buzzed. It was the investigator, and his first findings were already coming in. The evidence was damning, far beyond what I had expected. That night, as I sat alone in the darkened living room, I didn't feel the satisfaction I had anticipated. Instead, there was a hollow victory. I had set out to break her life as she had broken mine, but at what cost? The pieces of my own future were now as scattered as the ones of our shared past. But I knew there was no turning back. I had ignited a war of attrition against betrayal, and I was in it to the end. The path to retribution was laid out before me, and I was committed to walking it, no matter where it would lead. The days that followed were a blur of motion and emotion, each one a step further down the path of retribution. My once quiet mornings were now punctuated by updates from the investigator, each new piece of evidence a confirmation of Anna's deceit. Today was no different. As I sat with a cup of coffee, the phone rang, its shrill tone slicing through the stillness of the house. "Michael, you're going to want to see this." The investigator's voice was grim, and he promised to send over the latest findings within the hour. The doorbell rang sooner than expected, and I was handed an envelope thick with photographs and messages. The images were stark, undeniable, Anna with Tommy and others, their intimacy blatantly obvious. This was more than a one-time mistake, it was a pattern, a betrayal woven into the fabric of our daily lives. Fueled by a cold fury, I called Anna. She answered on the first ring, her voice cautious. "Michael, what is it?" she asked, a tremor of apprehension in her tone. "Just received another update from my investigator. It seems your indiscretions were not as isolated as you claimed," I said, my words clipped. There was a pause, heavy and laden with unspoken words. I can explain," she started, but I cut her off. "No need. Your actions speak clearly enough." "See you in court," I said sharply, ending the call before she could respond. The next steps were mechanical, driven by a need to see this through. I met with my lawyer to discuss the new evidence, planning our strategy for the divorce proceedings. Dan was methodical, laying out the implications of each piece of evidence, while I listened, the facts cementing my resolve. "With this, we can push for a more favorable settlement for you." "It's damning," Dan pointed out, marking documents as we spoke. "I'm not just after a favorable settlement. I want to ensure she can't do this to anyone else," I stated, my jaw set. "We'll make sure of it," Dan assured me, his professionalism a small comfort in the storm of my personal life. Later, I went for a walk, the city around me oblivious to the turmoil within. The streets were bustling with people, each absorbed in their own lives, their own stories. Mine had taken a turn I never anticipated, each step forward now heavy with the weight of broken trust. As I walked, my phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered, the investigator's findings making me wary of any unknown. "Michael?" "It's Tommy." The voice was hesitant, a stark contrast to the last time we had spoken. I stopped in my tracks, surprise momentarily overtaking anger. "What do you want?" I asked curtly. I think we need to talk." I didn't know she was married at first. I swear I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Tommy's words tumbled out, rushed and filled with a regret that I wasn't sure I could believe. "Meet me at Central Park, by the fountain in an hour," I said, a plan forming in my mind. If Tommy was willing to talk, perhaps there was more to this story. Maybe he could be a key piece in ensuring Anna faced the full consequences of her actions. As I headed toward the park, my steps were purposeful. This was not just a meeting, it was a chess move, one that might just corner my opponent for good. Central Park was drenched in golden hues as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows on the paths. I found Tommy waiting by the fountain, his posture tense, eyes flickering around nervously as if half expecting someone to jump out at him. The sight of him stirred a complex whirl of emotions within me, anger, certainly, but also a grim satisfaction that this was finally coming to an end. "Michael, thanks for meeting me," Tommy started, his voice shaky. "I really need to clear the air." "Talk," I commanded, my voice flat, cutting through the cool evening breeze. Tommy took a deep breath, his next words coming out in a rush. "I was in love with her. I thought she was separated, on the verge of divorce. She told me stories, made me believe," his voice trailed off, the regret palpable. "And you just took her word for it? Without questioning anything?" I interjected, my tone harsh. "I know it sounds stupid now, but yes, I did," Tommy admitted, his gaze dropping to his feet. "When I found out the truth, I ended it. But she wouldn't let it go easily." "That doesn't absolve you," I stated coldly. "I know, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I have proof of other things she's done, things that might help you in your case against her," Tommy revealed, pulling out his phone and showing me messages and emails between him and Anna, communications that painted a far darker picture than I had imagined. Taking the information, a plan formulated in my mind, cold and ruthless. "This will do," I said, pocketing the evidence. "Just, what are you going to do?" Tommy asked, a hint of fear creeping into his voice. "What needs to be done?" I replied cryptically, turning to leave. The following days were a whirlwind. Armed with new evidence, my lawyer and I presented a case so damning that Anna's facade crumbled under the weight of her own deceit. The court ruled overwhelmingly in my favor, granting me the divorce along with significant settlements, effectively stripping Anna of any leverage or dignity. But the real revenge came later. Using the evidence Tommy provided, I orchestrated a campaign that not only exposed Anna's betrayals to her professional community but also implicated her in unethical behaviors that had gone unnoticed. Her career, like our marriage, lay in ruins. As for Tommy, the young man who had unwittingly been part of this deceit, I ensured that his role was revealed, marking him as a pariah in his own circles. It was cruel, yes, but betrayal of such a nature demanded a ruthless response. Months later, I stood before the ruins of what had been my life, the battles fought and won, but at what cost? The victory was hollow, the taste of revenge bitter. Anna and I encountered each other one last time during the final proceedings. There was no dramatic confrontation, no exchange of words laden with emotion, just a silent acknowledgement of the devastation we had wrought upon each other's lives. As she walked away, her figure a shadow against the harsh light of the courtroom, I felt a chapter closing, a painful yet necessary end to a saga that had consumed us. We were part of each other's past, and that was where we would remain, forever parted not just by distance, but by the deep, unbridgeable chasm of betrayal. In the end, the loneliness of my triumph was a stark reminder, in the game of revenge, even the winners lose something irreplaceable.